I think we are just about ready. Hey, Al, how's it going?
Also, I'm going to start with you. First question. First question I want to ask is around what are you seeing companies doing right now to help their employees rescale to start getting ready for the changes that are happening, that are already happening right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big concern right now, David, as you know, with all the AI and robotics and everything that's coming into the landscape. You know, we decided that first we really need to identify the employees that are most impacted, right? So across the firm, across lines of business, the op centers that we have all over the country. And then second, we're running a lot of studies to really understand what's going to be the most effective way to help people make that transition. And then the third piece of it is going to be then, based on what we learned, right, with the studies, is how do we approach that learning in the most effective way? Because it's happening so rapidly. You know, it's not like, you know, I've been with the bank for 32 years. And if you think about the amount of change that I've seen in 30 years, at the very beginning, when you had innovation happening, you still had a little time, you know, to really deal with it. But with technology, right, that has really narrowed. And so we're having to be very, very quick here, as we know that people are being impacted daily, and we want to make sure that we're doing a good job of identifying within that our diverse population, and then how do we make sure, right, that we're accelerating that.
Awesome, thank you, Al. Al, I'd love to pull you in and talk about, do you have any thoughts around, are there any biases that we may have ourselves that are preventing us from not just leaning in, but jumping full steam into those opportunities that will allow us to get to those executive levels?
Nvidia. Got it?
Right.
Bottom line. I've been working and trying to be part of bringing us into the mainstream for over 40 years. Okay? Don't get baffled and get all charged up because this is the decade of the Hispanic. Because it should be, but it's not. And until we are able to really step in and really become a force for future, and I'm talking about, yeah, it's great to hear all the things we got to do together and how we're going to work together with the various ethnic and racial groups and all of, you know what, we haven't arrived yet. Let me ask you a question. Anybody know who the first Mexican-American Hispanic in a president's cabinet? Not just Secretary of Cabinet. There's 150 that are part of a president's cabinet. And you know when that was? Nobody knows?
Yes.
The first.
1976, and you're listening to me. The very first ever secretarial officer as Assistant Secretary of Interior, 1976, for management, budget, and administration. Okay, why did I tell you that? None of you knew it. That's okay. It's not about tooting your own horn either, but it is being smart and where do you take it? Who do you think were the first 3 Mexican-American Latinos ever to be White House Fellows? You're listening to one of them. Okay. The other 2 were Henry Cisneros and Luis Nogales. Okay? You probably only heard one. Okay? Let's go on beyond that. Who's the first Chicano to be a 2-star general? You're listening, John. East LA, 4 generations. And by the way, my family didn't cross a border. There was no border. We settled Tucson, Arizona. My mother was born in El Paso. My father, LA. I mean, I can go on and on. Okay, so at the end of the day, we probably are the best kept secret in our country. The other part of it, I'm going to tell you what concerns. I'm going to stop. Okay, because I could keep going. Maybe because of my age, I've earned it, but I'm not going to go any further.
Yeah, I have a 126 flight out of DFW.
And I've got a 4 o'clock to DC, so where are we going?
Okay.
So I just want to give you an applause for that. It is, to that point though, it is critical that we celebrate each other. It is critical that we are understanding the impact that we have made, not just in a community, but globally. So thank you for educating us on that. Because one of the big things we want to make sure we're doing is when we leave here today, we're taking action. So think about the actions you will take based on what you are hearing from our speakers today. Manny, we were talking a couple days ago and sort of different roles and different things that companies are doing to go ahead and start preparing. Are there certain types of roles you would actually either encourage people to jump into, whether it's a P&L focused role, or to stay away from, that would prevent you from being able to escalate up, even though it may seem like it's something that you should be jumping into?
Yeah, I don't think that there's any role you should avoid or not avoid. I think what you need to do is reflect on yourself, have the courage. I think Nina talked about courage, right? And I loved her, if you lack confidence, but everyone has courage, right? And I think having the courage to put yourself out there, right? And be flexible in opportunities that are available, right? My personal story is I immigrated from Cuba at age 8, right? Learned English at age 8. Started with KPMG right out of college, and I took an opportunity to move to Mexico City in my 9th year with KPMG, and that really was using the cultural and the language skills that I had to make a difference and differentiate yourself. So what I tell people at KPMG and other places is find the opportunities to set yourself apart, differentiate yourself, and build skill sets and competencies that will then show people that you can do it, right? And then out of the blue, like every job that I've had in my career, I never thought I would have. Never thought I would be asked to go to Mexico City. Never thought I'd come to Dallas, which is where I live now. Never thought I'd be asked to go to Denver and run our audit practice. I never thought I would be asked to run all of recruiting for KPMG. We hire 3,000 a year nationally. And I never thought I'd come back to Dallas and be the managing partner. But all during that time, I had great mentors and sponsors that saw the potential, right? And I was able to demonstrate some skill sets and some competencies and build on those that eventually allowed me to take on bigger and bigger roles. So the coaching point that I would have for everyone is really step out, have courage, build those mentors, build those sponsors, and everybody knows what the difference between sponsors and mentors are, right? Mentors counsel, help, provide guidance. I consider Al a very strong mentor.
Watch out what you say.
I've known Al for over 10 years now. He's a strong mentor, very important mentor of mine. But also find those sponsors. Those sponsors are the ones that are going to either tap you on the shoulder to take on bigger roles, or will stand up in a room and say, hey, I know the person that could take on that next role or that role that's available in the company. And that's John or Juan or Juanita, right? So look for those mentors, but also be cognizant about who your sponsors are going to be and create a board of directors in a sense. Figure out who your board of directors is that can propel you and advance your career as you yourself have courage to advance your own career.
So
I don't know if I answered the question.
you absolutely did,
Okay.
and you teed up the next question perfectly. And before I ask it, after we ask this question and they get a chance to respond, I'd love to start getting some questions from you guys. I think we want to make this really interactive. You touched on some of your cultural background that gave you opportunities, right? And leaned into that. I'd love to hear Al from you and Al's from you on what do you think are some of the, for lack of a better term, cultural superpowers that you have that make you so good, or how you grew up that makes you so great at what you've done from a career, from a life perspective.
You want to go?
Sure. I think that from a leadership perspective, I learned so much from my mother. Like when I think about like the heroes in my life, my mother's at the top of the list. And why do I say that? Because she was an immigrant to this country, and she didn't go past, I would call it like the 6th grade in Mexico. And that woman had this incredible sense of perseverance. I mean, like, figure out how to go over it, around it, under it. It didn't matter. Like, she just figured it out. And I remember, like, one day being a little girl, and just going to Chicago. She was gonna go do migrant work with some of her family, and she throws 4 kids in a station wagon and drives to Chicago. I'm not even sure she had a driver's license. I'm not really sure. But I guess my point just being that when I think about leadership skills, right? The ability to overcome adversity, the ability to get things done. In fact, I always told her like she should have like patented the just do it, because she had like no patience for like excuses, right? So I guess I took all of that. You know, some people might have said like, oh gosh, it seems like you might have had a harsh childhood, Alice. I don't think that at all. I mean, I took every bit of what I observed as a young girl and said, I have the gift, right, of having been the first to graduate from college, having the opportunity to work for JP Morgan, having been able to work in different lines of business in different states. So it's my responsibility now to take all of that and bring people forward. So from a cultural perspective, I think just the characteristics I saw from my mom, culture, values, etc., is what I would say.
Thank you, Alice.
Yeah, I have to keep looking up there and it says leadership and management, okay? Leadership, you're not born with it, first of all. You get taught it, either in the family, or in my case, military, and then of course education. And then I always remember when I was in Washington DC, heading up Atlantic Richfield, ARCO's federal government office in 1989. There was no other one of us in that whole city in a major oil company at that level. So I was a chief lobbyist, okay? The other part of all of this is, so what is leadership? The thing that I will tell you that the Army gave me after 36 years was the ability to never, ever look back and always understand, no matter what you face, you put one foot in front of the other and you walk right on out of it, no matter what you're into. I'm going to tell you a quick vignette of my abuelita Blanca, Plaza. My mother, when my grandmother passed away, 2 things. We buried her in something that I didn't really know a lot about, but now I've been on the board ever since that. Salvation Army. She gave back in East LA, where I grew up, ending up volunteering for Salvation Army in our community. Think about that. That was a long time ago. So we buried her in a uniform because that was her wish. But we also found one other thing. My mother found a little notebook. And in there, because my grandfather passed away in 1941 when my grandmother had 6 children to care for. And in that notebook, she wrote, every day she would write a date, save 10 cents, save 5 cents, save 25 cents, work 2 jobs, okay? Tortilleria, and also trying to be a, I guess we'd call him an interpreter at the local school there at City Terrace, East LA. So I'm giving you that for venues. So that's the culture that I come with. But I also come out of the Second World War culture where my dad was a lieutenant infantry, but he was also talk about role model. That's the other piece of this. He was the first ever Hispanic Mexican American to go to University of Southern California. That's my Stanford buddy up there. We're not talking about the football game. Played in the Rose Bowl in 1969. He was there in a football and track scholarship, and he was the alternate on the Olympic team. Okay? Who knows him? But if you go to the Hall of Heroes, where all the Heisman Trophy winners are on the USC campus, there's a plaque right as you enter on the right-hand side, Al Zaponte. Okay? So there are a lot of us that you don't know about that have been here a long time. And I'm not knocking immigrants. Thank God for immigrants, because we continue to provide what's needed. But at the end of the day, be very, very clear that what you bring with your culture and your family. I just am going on as a trustee of the University of Dallas, Catholic University. Whatever religion, but you bring that too, because we're very strong as a culture. And 3, education was the other piece. I never stopped being educated or educating myself. And the military, and you put it all, I just want to let you know very clearly that you all have what it takes. It's a matter of preparing yourself. Manny talked about it. You talked about it. So I'm going to stop. Thank you.
Questions? Who would like to ask the first question? And please say your name, so that.
Okay, Melissa Bolden with AT&T here in Dallas. So my question's for Manny. Manny, I'm a KPMG alum, and I attended the program that you guys have at KPMG that you guys sponsored called the Executive Leadership Institute for Women, which is probably the best women's leadership development program that I've been to. So my question is twofold. One, KPMG has been kind of a trendsetter and pace setter in changing the dynamic for working women. And I think now you guys have a female CEO, if I'm not mistaken. And you've done amazing things in terms of extending maternity leave to make it more feasible for women to stay at KPMG and grow their career. Can you share some insights, because I think you guys took very deliberate actions to change that model. One of the challenges that I think we face for Latinas or Hispanic advancement in general is I feel like we're not deliberate enough about success metrics. Can you share anything that you've seen either at KPMG or other companies that you work with that has done a good job about being deliberate about actions to advance Latinos in the workplace?
Yeah, so one of the roles I have at KPMG is I co-chair our Hispanic Latino network nationally. We have over 2,000 members. In fact, on the 1:26 p.m. flight that I have at DFW, I'm going to Chicago. We run what we call the Young Managers Leadership Program. We've identified 25 high-performing. They're about in their 6th to 7th year in their career, and it's a really, really important point in their careers because they're about to make senior manager, and then later they make director and then partner. And we've taken them through a year-long cohort program about how do you really accelerate your career potential, right? We give them exposure to leadership. We give them exposure to what is it like to go through an interview process to become a director or a managing director, right? So we're giving them line of sight, because what we saw is we lose too many Hispanics earlier than we lose the white employees, right? So what do we do to accelerate the development of our people in the Hispanic Latino community within KPMG so that they can have, the tools and the tool chest to be able to get that self-confidence, get that courage, and really step out. And we've been running it now for 3 years from a leadership development, right? It's leadership and management development, right? So we've been doing that. But at KPMG, the way, and I've been very passionate about inclusion and diversity for many years now, we look, I simplify it as hire more, retain more, develop more, and ultimately promote more. And it's a very simple formula. So you got to hire more in order to ultimately retain and develop more, right? So we've gone from, and I think all the Big Four have done a really good job actually in the diversity front. We've gone from 3.5% Hispanic Latinos to 8 or 9% over the last 10 years. We've gone to the retention and the work environment results that we do every year. The Hispanic Latinos are actually even more favorable about the firm that they work in than the whites. Every time there's a promotion to a senior management level, hey, is there a female candidate? Is there a Hispanic Latino candidate? Is there an African American candidate? Is there an Asian? Is there diversity in the slate of candidates that you're looking to fill a leadership role, right? So the firm has been very purposeful in terms of that, because we have to, all our clients are diverse and our clients are demanding it. You go to a board of directors meeting, they go, actually, a true story, about a year and a half ago, I got a phone call after an audit committee meeting from a chairman of a Fortune 100 AC audit committee chair, and he said, hey, that was a great, I thought he was calling me because, oh, what did we do wrong, what did we say? He said, it was a good meeting, by the way, you were all a bunch of white guys in the room. Where's the diversity on your team. And there was only 5 of us at the meeting. I reminded him that I was a Latino. Right? But he was looking for gender diversity as well, right? So what have we done? Well, first thing we did is I said to the engagement team, I said, let's lay out on a piece of paper, on a fold-out, what our team looks like. In actuality, our entire team of 25 to 30, because it's a large engagement, actually has a lot of women and some diversity, Asian, Hispanic, Latino, and African American. So we brought it to the audit committee meeting, and they actually could see the diversity of our engagement team. They're just not at the highest level, and that's part of the discussion today, is how do you get those people that are Hispanic, Latino, and ethnically diverse into higher levels of management. And that comes from the development programs, being part of affinity networks, finding good mentors like Al, finding sponsors, right? And all of you need to be also paying it forward. I look around the room, there aren't any 22 or 23-year-olds in the room, right? Most of you are in your 30s, 40s, 50s. There's a few 20-year-olds in the room? Okay, there's one. I know, I miss looking over there. I miss looking over there.
60s.
Yeah. But you all need to pay it forward, right? You need to take, and think about the multiples that can happen. If there's 50 people in the room right now, if you pick 3 people to mentor or sponsor, it's like a catalyst for a multiplier effect, right? So you need to really think about yourself, not only what you're doing for your own career and how you're picking your sponsors and your board of directors and all that. Think about what you're doing for others, right? I just got an email just yesterday. I met a student at Alpha about 6 years ago. She sent me an email out of the blue this weekend. She goes, Manny, I just want to let you know I got promoted to manager. And I don't know if you remember me or not, and I did not. Her name is Adriana. She goes, and I want to thank you because you took time to spend time with me I probably spent 5 minutes with her, right? But we ended up hiring her, and now she's a brand new manager, and she sent me a nice email. And thanks to, and by the way, the other plug I'll put in is, there's organizations out there that are doing great things. Alpha, which you're the CEO of, Damien. There's High Tech, which some of you in the room are familiar with. There's LCDA, which Al has been very, Latino Corporate Directors Association. There are lots of organizations out there that are really making a difference in advancing the careers of Hispanic Latinos. So kudos, and get involved with those organizations. If you're an IT professional, get involved with High Tech. If you're a Latino, and get involved with Alpha, as an example. If you're aspiring to be on a board, get involved with LCDA, right? All of these organizations are doing so much for diversity and ethnic, in particular Latinos. So that's a long-winded answer to your question.
Can I add something to that? Because at JP Morgan, we have a similar type of program. And one of the things I noticed is we have about 150 Hispanic managing directors in the company. And one day as I was looking at an opportunity in Columbus, Ohio, this was going to be for a managing director. Okay, there we go. Job. I went down the list.
You must have a Buckeye over there.
And Manny kind of alluded to it, only 5% of that number were Latinas. And so I told the other women, the other managing directors along with me, we need to be very intentional about talking about some of the cultural challenges that Latinas might have. Because when we had that job open in Columbus, it was a big job, it really was. I mean, I started going down to the executive director levels and calling the women that I knew, that I had worked with, right, back to your point about sponsorship. Hey, you should really put your name in the hat. This is going to be outstanding. I don't know if I could move, my mom is here and this and that. And look, trust me, it's hard. I mean, I did it. It's really, really hard. But if we don't encourage one another and talk about, right, the career mobility and the impact that makes in terms of your ability to be considered for a managing director or managing partner role, it just does, your ability to have moved across. So I would just, as you guys think about, I personally think that more companies need to figure that cultural piece out because it's real, but then you guys out there ought to be encouraging one another as well.
Let me give you the other side of the coin. All your colleagues want the next job. So be prepared just because you're a Latino or Latino, that, oh, I should be getting it. Don't kid yourself. Being in an oil company, you want to know about rednecks, I can talk to you about that. Be very, very conscious that it's about you and your sponsor, period. Okay, you can have the best education, you can be the smartest person in the room. At the end of the day, understand one thing. There's probably a half a dozen other people that want that next job that you think you should have. And don't think you're gonna get it because you're a Latina or a Latino. You gotta put it in, okay?
Being strategic, if I could just build on that, Al, like being real strategic then. That was one of the little naive things I learned when I was coming up in the company is I just thought, well, I'm doing good at my job, right? I excel what I'm doing. And I had a mentor at the time who was the president of the bank here, and we were having like coffee one day, and he says, well, let me see your plan on how you're gonna make sure that others in the company know who you are, what you do, what's your brand. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, yeah, have you like talked to the chairman of the bank? Have you done this? Have you done that? I'm like, no, like what am I gonna talk to them about? And it's to Al's point, like, because look, you're one of like X number of people that are looking for that next job, and guess what they're doing? They're having coffee, they're doing this, they're doing that, and now, when people are sitting around the table saying, who ought to be the next person to do this? They're not gonna know who Al Rodriguez is, they know this person and this person and this person, so I think it's just such a wonderful point, Al.
I have a question. So, Annie, you mentioned that you were losing young Latino candidates at a faster pace. What prompted that? Like, what did you learn through that process? And then also, to your point, from an inclusion standpoint, and this question is for anybody, like, what happens within the organization to try to break down some of those barriers and make people more comfortable to go talk to the CEOs and and that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, some of it is twofold. Latinos are sought after by our clients, right? So they see a good Latino, a Latina, they're gonna try to hire them away. That's one, right? So the really good ones were sought after. But the other thing is the cultural. You may be the only Latino working in Omaha, Nebraska, right? If you're not in New York or Dallas or Houston, where you have a little bit more community, you kind of felt disconnected. So our Hispanic Latino network has worked hard to make sure that people feel a sense of community, whether you're in a more outlying office versus a main office, and then getting people involved, even if you're in Dallas or in Houston or New York or LA, get involved in that network. And we go to Alpha every year as a big contingent, and we bring the retention rate of folks within KPMG that attend the Alpha convention is 20% higher than, or some number close to that, than those that have not attended a convention in the last 3 years. So building a sense of community, and the Latino culture is family, and we call it the Alpha Familia in a sense, right? If people feel connected with one another, they feel like they can have each other's backs and they can call each other. It just builds that other sense of belonging. And then the firm as an overall has been pushing inclusion and diversity very strongly and holding accountability all the way up the chain. So people see that it's an important component of our culture.
The other part of that is, I'm going to be the contrarian. Maybe I've been around so long, I got a few scars. But, you need not be the one with a brown nose. You already got a brown nose, so don't make it dark. I'm going to give you a quick vignette. I was brought in by the CEO, a guy named Robert O. Anderson, that was the largest landholder in New Mexico, and was the CEO of Chairman of ARCO. We were having a problem because I was the link between Pemex, Mexico, and our federal government at the time. And we owned Anaconda, but we also owned Cananea, the largest copper mine south of the U.S. border. And we had a lot of problems. Now, this is going back 25 years. That the unions were blocking and owed us a lot of money, et cetera, and it wasn't getting better. And so sitting in the room with 5 executive VPs and the CEO and Here's this Chicano from East LA. I can see where I grew up at out the window. The towers there in Arca. They asked questions on what we should do. Well, we're going to sue them. We're going to do this to the Mexican government. You know? And then the chairman asked me, because I knew him, talk about sponsoring, okay? Can't get any better than that one. And by the way, he met me when I was Assistant Secretary of the Interior, because then we had energy under my control in that department, okay? So there's a lot of connects on that one. And I said it very plainly, I said, give it back to the Mexican government. Yeah, you would have thought, I said, you know, your little boys, whatever. And all of a sudden, he looked at me and he said, why? I said, because it's not going to get better. Secondly, copper's at less than 4 cents a pound, and it's not going to get better. So, you know, if anything we do in the oil and gas industry is we always try to develop reserves so we have a future to go forward. That was not a future. And what did we do? We gave it back to the Mexican government. And they never opened it for 20 years. So again, what do you think? You know, courage comes in many strands in many ways. Military, I can talk to you about that. Government, when you're sitting in that room, have the courage to make the call. Don't sit there and just nod your head because you want to be accepted.
This way, you got the questions.
Dr. Richard Conde, I'm a professor at the University of Houston downtown. So we heard earlier that 75% of Latinos can't be themselves at work. We also heard through that the motivating factor for us to share more are cultural values. So Latinos have a different cultural subscripts than Anglos. You know, personalismo, simpatía, things of that general nature. And sometimes they don't line up with the corporate culture because corporate culture is led by Americans who don't have the same cultural background.
Anglos, we're all Americans.
Yes, Anglos, whatever. I call them Anglos, you call them Americans, we're good. So my question is, how does a Latino, Hispanic, whatever term you want to use, with all these subcultural values that influence their behaviors that sometimes clash with the corporate culture, how do they balance that? And what can a corporate do differently to welcome the differences?
Well, do you want me to take it on since I'll give you another sense of it. And by the way, one of the things that I get concerned about, less than 30% of all the Latinos and Latina immigrants are now becoming citizens. That used to be much higher. And that concerns the hell out of me. It should concern you, because it's our country. I'm not going to get political on that. But going to your point, I just really am, you know, we got to get over that we're owed something. We're not other groups. We're our own group. Don't ever forget. I did anybody who did Ancestry.com? Anybody check who you really are?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm afraid to.
My wife is too. Anyway, you know what? It doesn't say Mexican. It doesn't say Ecuadorian. You know what it says? Native American, from the North Pole to the South Pole.
Aspects.
Remember that. That's the binding. That's the culture. We've been here in the country.
Just to answer your question from my perspective is bring yourself to work. Don't try to be someone you're not. And if you bring yourself to work and you're the person you are, and it doesn't fit with who you're working for, find another enterprise to work at, right?
No, I agree with you. I think the challenge is people are doing that, but Hispanics have higher quit rates than non-Hispanics. So I think that, and I do a lot of research in this topic, so maybe that's not too academic, but I think the missing part is that our cultural strengths, we need to understand them better so we can adjust. Because the people who run corporations will have the cultural shifts that we do, and I think that's missing in all of this because our attrition rates are higher than non-Hispanics.
Yeah, I think we've come a long way. I mean, if I was thinking about the 60s or 70s, which of course I wasn't working then, even when I started
What are you
in...
pointing at me for?
When I started in the mid-'80s with KPMG, I was maybe 1 or 2 out of 100 new hires that was Latino, Hispanic Latino. But, you know, I was myself and I assimilated and, you know, it worked. Now today, we know we're 9% of the new hire class. So there's more opportunity to be yourself and join the organization. And most organizations these days are a lot more sensitive about inclusion and diversity. Whether you're Asian, whether you're African American, you're female. There's been a lot of efforts around women's initiatives, to your point earlier. I think sometimes the women's initiatives, which Latinas are part of, which is good, right, have taken so much focus. I actually believe that the African Americans and Hispanic Latinos have kind of taken a back step to the inclusion and diversity initiatives that have taken place, and I think Al is in agreement with that. For instance, California just changed the rule that by 2021 or some year in the near future, you have to have 3 independent women for every public company that's domiciled in California. Well, I know LCDA, right, the Latino Corporate Directors, is pushing the legislature. Why not a Hispanic Latino in California? What percentage of Californians are Latino? Probably 25? More than the average in the US, right? So 25, whatever the number is. Why? There's not enough thinking about diversity from a ethnic perspective as compared to gender as there been. If we had the push for ethnic diversity as we've had for, thank goodness, for women, we'd be in a lot better position. But I think over time that will change, and there's more attention being paid to ethnic diversity in addition to gender diversity.
So can I just add something here, like, because I've really been internalizing what you're trying to get at, and I think there has been, in most corporations, a lot of focus on the D&I thing, right, the diversity, but it's real that even you can have all of that. It doesn't mean that people are going to behave that way, right? You know what I mean? So I do think, like, I love this word courage that we've been kind of threading here, whether it was earlier with Nina's session or I've heard Al say it already, Manny has used it. I think that as Latinos in the corporation, you just have to have the courage to use your voice and to be more united in that voice, making sure people feel comfortable, because unfortunately it is going to be real. Like, there's going to be people at the top that are going to do things together and figure out like who is top of mind for them, right? And maybe the person who's Hispanic is going to feel like, I don't know, I don't have anything in common with them. Like, in other words, you're self-defeating yourself. You've already talked yourself into, like, I don't belong here, I shouldn't say anything, blah, blah, blah. And you just can't do that. You're just going to have to say, I'm comfortable. And it's always more comfortable when you can have a few people, right, helping you along the way.
I don't like the term diversity. You know why?
We're all diverse.
Thank you, but more importantly, you know what it means to corporate America? Black and white. Be very conscious of that. And that's something that I saw very clearly, both sitting on one of the top Fortune 50 boards, Tyson Foods, for 12 or 13 years. And I saw it in the military. Do you know there's 48 black generals? You know how many Latinos are? 2. What's the rate of kill and injured in the last 17 years that we've been in the Middle East? 20% are Latino, the highest percentage. I mean, I go on and on. You got to really keep that in focus. I'm not saying that you eliminate the rest of it, but be very clear.
But I think it's the voice, Al. I really do, because, like, Nina made that comment in there about, like, there is no Jesse Jackson coming, right?
We don't need a Jesse Jackson. We need us. Everybody in the
room. Well, I agree with that, but that's the point. Like, I've been doing a lot of work around financial health and the average net worth, right, of a Latino household. What do y'all think it is without durable goods?
25, 35.
$2,000. For the average black household, I'm talking households here, okay? It's $1,700. What do you think it is for a white household?
You got the dynamics.
$135,000 net worth, okay? And so I said the other day, when I was with the Unidos conference, we always talk about like, oh, the $1 trillion spending power that Latinos have in this country. And I'm like, please, let's change the narrative. Because I want it to be the $1 trillion in terms of, you know, purchasing power to buy assets. That's what we need to do. And I do think it's going to take everybody's voice, right? Because you don't hear that. Like, nobody's worried about that. I'm like, why isn't anybody worried? It is. It's wealth creation.
You know, the
so.
stat we saw today on the college education of women and Latinos, I think that was very encouraging. I had not seen that before. That was
So-
very encouraging.